even any other horizontal relation, your kids even. If there's a problem in the communication, there's probably a sin somewhere. So it's important to understand that. But if there is a sin, then we come back over here and work on restoring the vertical. So we always got to go back to the vertical. If there's a problem on the horizontal, we got to go back to the vertical and get that right so that we can go to whoever has a problem with us. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's them. But you have to get the vertical right, confess whatever the sin is, and get that vertical restored so that you can go back to your brother or your neighbor here and reestablish a healthy horizontal relationship. And the other thing is, without being intentional, it's hard to do this. You can't just hope it's going to turn out okay. You have to make it be okay.
Right.
You have to be intentional about, I got to be intentional about the pyramid over here. You have to consistently focus on trying to keep things in the right order with your relationships. God has to be first, then your spouse, then your kids, then everybody else. All the external family, exes, in-laws, outlaws, etc. And then your job, and then any ministry or anything that you may have. But you have to be intentional about keeping those relationships in the right priority. Anytime there's an issue, again, like I said, with the vertical, if that's not right there at the top, all this other stuff is going to kind of start falling apart. There's going to be problems. And we go back again to the 1 John 3 through 10. Sin is going to create problems in there. And it explains how that works. But pray together daily, date night, Galatians 5 is part of the homework, Ephesians 4, 5, and 6. We have to be careful how we speak to one another. One of Carol's things was be tender and gentle.
Yes.
If you're not being tender and gentle, then there's a problem somewhere. Because you're just in the flesh, you're speaking evil things, your mind is in the gutter, right? You just want to get even, you don't like what's happening, but you're not in control either. So use that fruit of the Spirit of self-control to allow yourself to be tender and gentle and kind and confident in who you are, right? If we're not confident in who we are, especially as a Christian, and we're not allowing the Holy Spirit to work in us, then we're going to be more at the mercy of our circumstances. Instead of influencing the stuff around us, everything around us is going to be coming against us. And, we're supposed to be the salt and the light. We're supposed to add flavor. We're supposed to help be a preservative. We're supposed to be the light that illuminates. And, part of the illumination is shining the light on the evil stuff that's going around, or the negative stuff. And so that's our job as Christians, to be the one that speaks truth and life into whatever relationship we're working with at the time. But especially a spouse. God is number one, our spouse is number two. And like it says on the pyramid there, if we have some sort of a ministry, our spouse should be our first ministry. And then everybody else comes after that. We see it very often. We've counseled a lot of pastors' kids, even some pastors themselves. And invariably, the the ministry, the work of God has gotten up there like 1.1, and family is number 5. It's just, I'm so busy doing everything at the church, especially as senior pastor, if it's like a small church. He has to do everything. So he does everything except take care of his own family. He's taking care of everybody else, and then his own family suffers. So make sure your spouse is your number one human relationship. All right. Any comments, questions? Anybody?
We have seen many, as you said, we've counseled many pastors and associate pastors and pastors' kids. And when we point out the priority pyramid, which I think we were pointing that out, Larry, before we even had this ministry, we were saying, because if you remember one couple that came to us, he was a PK, but he also was very active in his dad's church. And the wife's problem was he's not paying any attention to me. Mm-hmm. And they just had a 6-month-old little girl. And we asked him, what vacations do you remember you taking with your folks? They never took any. Mm-hmm. We said, well, what times did your dad and your mom, did you sit down for family meals? We didn't. Everything revolved around my dad's schedule for the church. And we said, no wonder you're having problems in your marriage. Your dad and mom were doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong, but he did it because that's what he was shown.
Right.
And that's what happens a lot of times.
Yeah.
Now, their relationship is thriving, and he's very active in their church and doing wonderful, but them as a couple, they're just...
And they're doing it together.
Yeah, they're flying off the charts. They're awesome.
Yeah. So
but
that's...
you don't know, you don't know.
And that's just it. We do what our folks did, for the most part. We talked about that a couple of chapters ago, and who's normal is normal, right? You do based on what you've been shown. We hardly ever do what we hear and not do what we've seen, right? So that's the big thing, is just whatever you've learned and heard and seen and all that in the past, it's create a new godly normal. You've got one, they've got one, and they're both probably messed up. But start working on the vertical, trying to get that right, so that you can create a new normal over here on the horizontal. So just keep in mind, first things first. Do the vertical, keep that in good standing. First you got to obtain it, then you got to maintain it. Occasionally you need to restore it. Psalm 51. And then the horizontal, especially spouses, pray together daily. That creates the intimacy that you're looking for. Date night helps with that also, but it also reinforces to your children how important your marriage is. And read and understand Ephesians 4, 5, and 6, and Galatians 5, so that you understand what your job is and how you're supposed to do marriage. It's right there. Do that.
Praise the Lord.
Question?
Well, I was just going to make a comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
What you guys were talking about, the scripture tells us that we need to run our households well.
Mm-hmm. Have your house in order.
First witness as to, how faithful you are to the Lord. Your family is a reflection of that.
Good.
But also looking at different ones in the Bible that, were mightily used of the Lord, but their family fell apart.
Oh, yeah.
So David, Samuel, the prophet Eli, and then one that people may know modern day, Franklin Graham. His son ran for many years. Now he's back in the ministry, but he was, out there, and he was a wild guy.
Yeah.
Because one of the concerns that they had reported was that my dad spent so much time in the ministry.
Yeah.
We didn't get a chance to develop a relationship with him. And
Right.
they were very envious and
You're
jealous
listening to
of that.
ChristianLivingRadio.com.
Very good.
With
Yeah,
the
and that's what
Snapps.
happens is, you know, it's very obvious to the children that the ministry is much more important to mom and dad, or dad anyway, than me. And, you know, I'm just here, but jealousy is a big part of that. And that's one of the reasons a lot of PKs rebel, is because they had no relationship with their folks, right? And it's one of those things where, like I said, especially a pastor is supposed to have the house in order,
Yeah.
because of the witness is messed up. If your house is out of order and you're trying to tell somebody else how to put theirs in order, it's not going to fly.
Do you ever think that sometimes there's not an excuse for lack of information, though, in this day and age? When we have unlimited resources and in the palm of our hands with phones, that oftentimes it's just an excuse of, oh, well, I didn't know better, or this is how my parents raised me. If you really stop to think if that worked for you and if that works for your family, just find a plethora of information and better yourself, too.
Yeah, one of those things that, unfortunately, like I said, it's one of those excuses we tend to use, like, well, that's just the way I am.
Yeah. As if the thought to change never occurred, unfortunately.
Right. And the whole point of being a Christian is to be transformed,
And grow, yeah.
right?
Well,
And become spiritually mature.
Yeah.
But if all you say is, well, that's just the way I am, take it or leave it. Well, a lot of people are going to leave it.
Excuse.
Yeah.
There's going to always be an excuse for anything we do. It's just, and when you start making up excuses, then you can look at yourself as exactly right.
Yeah.
Not
So
others.
change is hard. It's scary. You're moving from, even if it's bad, it's something you know.
It's familiar.
You're familiar with, I know what I'm going to get here. I have no idea what I'm going to get if I change.
What's that saying? The devil I know is better than the devil I don't, or the unknown, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to speak on the importance of date night. Because of the fact when we come in today's families, we may have children, so we have built up a more closer relationship with our children. And so we become experts as a parent, but not experts as a couple.
Oh, that's good.
And so what happens is, over time, we end up growing apart because we don't even know each other anymore.
Right. Yeah, very
And
good
so we
point.
think, what's the purpose of staying? I'm a stranger to this individual. And so the importance of keeping that date night, keeping that coupleship. The one thing is that because you did have the children before, but if not, you would have, had that coupleship that you knew about each other. Well, even before you had that dating, that dating part. And what happens when we do life, we forget about the reason why we ended up coming together in the first place. You said that before. We need to maintain that.
Yeah.
And the date night helps with maintenance of it.
Right, exactly. And you brought up a good point, especially in a blended family where most parties have been a single parent for a while. 2-3 years, 8, 9, 10, could be a while. So it's all about the kids. It's you and your kids. Now all of a sudden another person comes into your life. How do you put them ahead of your kids they've been all you've had for however long?
Have history with it.
Yeah, you got all this history. This has been your normal for all these years. Now all of a sudden this other person comes in and they have kids. How do you put these two adults ahead of all these kids? That's why so many of them don't make it. They just can't. They either can't or they refuse to. We've seen many couples that have refused to even consider the possibility of putting this other human ahead of their own kids. But that's that ownership versus stewardship mentality. When you're the owner of your kids, you just can't put somebody else ahead of them.
Well, a lot of people too, Larry, get stuck in their routine. For example, some people
sure.
are working 3 nights a week, the other parent's working 4 nights a week. The only time they see each other maybe is on a Sunday. And so they don't week after week after week goes by, and they don't make the time